Good afternoon. My name is Dr. John Peter Petrone, and I'm Assistant Professor of Educational Administration here at ENMU in the Educational Studies Department. And today I'm going to give you a presentation on school threat assessment, which is a presentation I usually give to our incoming student-teacher candidates twice a year. And before I get going on that, a little bit about my background. I was a social science high school teacher and a high school principal for 15 years, most of that in the state of California. And that's where I get my principal experience. And I try to bring to my classes a lot of practical knowledge in addition to the perfunctory theory and other knowledge that you get when you take our courses. I'll talk a little bit more about the program at the end after our presentation. So, without further ado, let's get to our school site threat assessment. And a not so ordinary day in a high school. This talks about an actual incident that occurred when I was a high school principal in California. And as I said prior, I make this presentation to incoming student teachers because teachers are very important in assisting during these potentially stressful, dangerous situations that may or may not occur. So let's start off with a little background. Unfortunately, nowadays, school shootings and school incidents of violent acts are all too common, and I'll try not to read word for word from the slides because that's not proper PowerPoint presentation anyway. But you can see the statistics are quite grim, going back to Columbine and the other terrible shooting incidents across the nation at all levels, elementary right up through universities. I think you remember the terrible Virginia Tech shooting as well. So with more and more of these situations occurring, school districts and universities throughout the United States had to come up with a way for staff, stakeholders, administrators, how to deal with specific threat assessments and how to go through a decision-making process when you're dealing in real time with these potential incidents. So with that background, there are technically two types of threats that we deal with on our campus. They're transient and substantive threat types. And if you're going to have a situation occur on campus, you would much rather deal with a transient type of threat. You can see the examples there of transient threats, and those are usually resolved in real time, relatively quickly. And you're dealing with students that are on your campus primarily. Again, these are, as an administrator or a teacher, these are the types of threats that you would rather have if you have to deal with threats. The substantive ones, those are the more potentially dangerous and violent threats, and very serious. Oftentimes, they deal with potential weapon use, and again, if physical evidence that shows that a threat may be carried out. These are extremely serious, and all school stakeholders must, when they recognize or identify these types of threats, there is a specific process in place that you and your threat assessment team that you put together at your site must implement. So there's a decision tree that you must go through, and it's a school threat assessment decision tree. And what you do is you evaluate the threat. If the answer to that first step is yes, then you go to the second step. If it's no, then that's what you hope for, not a threat, maybe that's more of a transient type of threat that occurs, and you're able to solve the problem. But if the answers to each of these decision tree steps is yes, no, you have to take it all the way to the most severe steps, which is step 5. And again, this is just a guide that most schools use, and it helps you. Most school administrators have these in their office in front of them to help keep their thoughts focused and deal with the stressful situation that's occurring in real time. So let's fast forward to that terrible day, February 14th, 2018, Parkland, Florida shooting, which occurred on campus by a current student in Parkland, Florida. And take note of the date, because the situation I'm going to describe occurred approximately 48 hours later in our school. So here's the suspect of the Parkland, Florida shooting. That is actually his booking photo after he was arrested. And that photo is going to crop up again in the course of describing what occurred at our school. So I want to emphasize, in any school threat situation, teachers are absolutely critical. They are in the first line of safety in our schools, and it's really simple. Why? Because they are often hearing casual comments that are made amongst their students, and as a professional, you need to keep your ears open at all times, even if the comment wasn't addressed specifically to you as a teacher. Again, they are usually the first to hear of significant information. And in the case of what happened in our school, you'll see that absolutely that was the case. And obviously verbal, students pass notes, social media obviously is a huge way to gain information. And you need to know specifically, no matter if you're a school teacher, a custodian, a maintenance worker, a counselor, school nurse, you have to know what the process is at your site. And often what I would do when I was a high school principal is at the beginning of the school year staff meetings, we would go over every year the school threat assessment process, and every teacher has a copy of the process in their classroom within easy reach. And then there's a high school threat assessment flow chart that we use as well. And this again is primarily for students on campus that potentially could be a threat. And it kind of echoes in a different format the decision tree as well. But what I wanted to point out is your school site team, these are the individuals that are usually on your school site threat assessment team. And we try to encompass all of those stakeholders, and of course some of these are available immediately and some of them aren't, but you want to try to have as many stakeholders in your site threat assessment team. Again, there's the assessment decision tree. So again, look at the date. Take notice, 2 days after the Parkland, Florida shooting. This is what occurred. So at 10 a.m. on that day, I had a earth science teacher call me on the phone from her classroom and said she was sending up a student because she heard some concerning information about a Facebook post that was made that morning by a former student of our school. This young man was a former student of ours. he had been expelled. He had some gang affiliation, and at the time of this act, he was 19 years old, so he was technically an adult. So even though initially our school threat assessment is focused on on-campus students and what potentially can happen with them, in this particular case we had to kind of adapt a little bit because the threat emanated from an external former student, but a lot of the steps are the same way. You still have to take it extremely serious, especially when you see what was posted. So, possible substantive threat when it's made. Our campus and our district had a school resource officer assigned to us who is a local police officer assigned to the school district, and we pay part of his salary, and there's grant money and those types of things. But he was a fully authorized law enforcement officer on campus. So when this information came to me, I immediately called him on the radio and summoned him to the office. And we did some interviews initially. And she said to us that she read a Facebook post that morning that featured the Nicholas Cruz, the suspect in Parkland, his booking photo. And essentially, to paraphrase, he stated on that Facebook post that he was going to do the same thing to our high school. She initially told us that she had deleted the post, but that she knew because that post got shared all throughout the school, she knew of other students, she knew of another specific student who she thought still had it on her phone. The SRO said in order to verify the threat, he needed to see it and ascertain it from a law enforcement perspective, how we should classify this threat. So we got student B's cell phone number and called her directly because unfortunately we had just released her to go to the dentist, so we had to track her down. But she did have a copy of the post, and she texted it to us, and there it is. And it's the booking photo. Here's the expelled student. I'm going to be the next one to shoot up a place I don't like, GHS. That was our high school. So in my mind, just initially seeing that without hearing the opinion of the law enforcement officer, that just moved it to a substantive threat at that point. So I'm already thinking, okay, this is how we have to proceed. So here's what we started to do. So we closely, obviously, coordinated with law enforcement to determine what actions we should take next in the whole framework of the decision tree. We started that process. So the SRO immediately determined that we needed to find out the location of the suspect because we had not seen the young man in a year and a half, and although he was last listed as living within the town where the high school was, there are rumors that he might have been in San Jose with his brother, which is a good hour and a half drive away from the school. So we needed to know where he was. And then obviously apprehend the suspect if possible. And at the same time, I had to attempt to notify the superintendent and try to coordinate with the district office that this was brewing, this situation. And you know, you always have to keep the district office in the loop. But we were presented with some complexities that day as well, which made the situation a little bit more tense. And I'll show you why. Complicating factors that day. When the post was officially verified as a substantive threat, we were in the middle of lunch hour. You'll see, we had a different schedule that day, so lunch hour was earlier. And we have a semi-open campus, so half of our students were off campus having lunch, and the other half were on campus, so that was a complicating factor. My assistant principal, who was part of the threat assessment team, was out sick that day, so that obviously was a complication. We were unable to get the superintendent for the first 3 hours of this crisis because he was on the road and out of cell phone. We were not able to reach him by cell phone. And we had a FFA rally scheduled for the entire school, PM schedule, on the football field with the entire student body in the stands. Obviously, a lot of things are going through your mind at that point. Obviously, you have outdoor PE classes going on as well. So all of these things are running through your mind. At this point, I also brought in my school counselor and the other member of our site threat assessment team that was available at the time to discuss what we were going to do. And then, of course, I had after-school athletic practices we had to worry about as well. All of these things you worry about immediately. So when a substantive threat has been identified, you have to weigh all the factors. Do we go into a heightened state of awareness, or the more dramatic lockdown? And this is discussed amongst the members of the site team. And as a rule, if the law enforcement is very definitive on a position we should take, we defer to law enforcement at that point. But we do discuss it. One of the questions I ask student teachers is, and from their experience as students, what does a lockdown look like at a school? And one of the things I have to determine, if I make what I consider the draconian decision to lock down a facility, all learning stops. And at our particular site, a lockdown was anybody walking by a door gets pulled in, locked, lights off, everybody under their desks furthest away from the door as possible, and no noise. And potentially, depending on the length of the threat, they could be in that situation for hours. As a matter of fact, we as a district, we purchased lockdown kits for every classroom, which had some basic supplies, first aid kit, had a bottled water, had some snacks, and believe it or not, a cardboard partition porta potty. Because if you're locked down for several hours, you have to think of all of those things. And again, it's an imminent threat situation if you're going to disrupt the school environment in such a way. So what we decided to do as a team was go into a heightened state of awareness because the suspect was not located. We weren't even sure if he was in the area. He was not seen in the town where the high school was. So with law enforcement's approval, he agreed that we should go in a heightened state of awareness. So what does that look like? So the SRO at that point contacted the other PD officers from the town that we were located, and the chief, to get them to start working on locating the suspect. And obviously, if he was in the vicinity, to apprehend him immediately. The chief also, because a very small police department, maybe a dozen officers and maybe 2 or 3 on at any shift, he had to notify the neighboring town's police department for potentially any mutual aid requests if they got any other calls, because they were going to devote their resources to trying to locate this individual. He gave us one officer who did nothing but drive his patrol car back and forth in front of the road that fronted the school. So that was at least some semblance of security. But it was a wide open campus and many access areas that if this individual was determined to get on campus, he could. So we made the decision to suspend all outdoor PE classes immediately, and the students that were out there setting up the FFA rally, we called them all in with the staff that were out there helping them. And then we had to establish a time frame where we were going to have to cancel everything. At that point, it was still being assessed. So the first thing is you get everybody from outside inside, and then with consulting with law enforcement, establish a time where we would have to inform all the stakeholders involved in those activities that it was canceled. So again, we were on a rally schedule. What we did was we sent an email to all the staff stating that we had received a possible threat and that we were on the heightened state of awareness, which they knew from their materials what that means. And we had 2 campus supervisors, and we sent them physically to every single classroom to make sure that the staff members had seen the email and read the email. Again, we made a PA announcement and asked them to immediately check their inbox, and we sent physically 2 people around to each classroom to verify everybody was in the loop. So what does that mean for staff, teachers? No hall pass is issued unless it's an emergency, and if they issue a pass, they had to call us. So we knew exactly where those students in that situation were at any given time. All PE classes were ordered indoors. Again, we suspended the work on the setup of the rally. And we asked the teachers to pull out their lockdown procedures to refresh their memories in case we had to go to that extreme step. But more importantly, under heightened state of awareness, we wanted teachers to teach and to stay calm and be professional at all times. You don't want to panic. You don't want to get the students nervous. Just know that, or have the confidence that we are instituting our site threat assessment and the crisis team is meeting, and we are engaged in dealing with this. So what happened? We agreed upon a go, no-go time. When we reached that time, the suspect was still not located, so we had to cancel. The rally was postponed for a week. All after-school activities were canceled. The athletic director contacted all coaches to inform their athletes that all the practices were canceled. We were finally able to contact the superintendent, and when we told him and explained to him what we were doing, he supported our plan, and he initiated his personnel at the district to do their side of getting the word out to parents and stakeholders, because obviously we had our hands full on the site. So we stayed under the heightened state of awareness until 2:55, and the SRO crisis team, we got the word from the SRO that they found him, and he was in town. He was literally 2 blocks away from the school, and when they closed in on him, he was walking down the street, and he attempted to flee, and he jumped a fence and ran into an alleyway, and they were able to corner him and place him under arrest at that time. One thing to note is the time that they got him, the ending bell was going to ring at 3:07, and we had school buses lined up, and we had to make a decision. If they had not gotten him, are we going to allow everybody out at that time when we still didn't know where he was. But thank goodness they apprehended him about 10 minutes before the bell rang, so that decision was made for us. Now, the aftermath, and this is, these are duties and exposures that as a school administrator and potentially teachers, these are not things you think about what happened afterwards, but here's what happened. There's the young man. I blocked out his name, but we were the lead story on Fresno News, every news station, and that's the ABC affiliate there. And the Merced Sun-Star is the largest newspaper in Merced County, and that was the lead story on the paper and the website of the newspaper. Again, he was 19 years old, so he was an adult. And he was charged with making criminal terrorist threats, and he was on probation, so he was charged with violating his probation and interfering with officers and police. He faced some serious charges at that time. And what's interesting to note is this was in February, and I was already scheduled to retire at the end of that school year. But that's when I took the position here at Eastern New Mexico University. But you will see that even though I had left there and retired from the California teaching system, I still had duties to perform after I left. And those are subpoenas issued to me after I had left and moved to New Mexico. I had to fly back to California on multiple occasions for hearings and to testify in this young man's case. And so most people don't realize that your duties don't stop when the actual threat has been taken care of. So I did, and I did that. And what eventually happened afterwards is they went to, I think they started to go to trial, and then the local district attorney agreed to a plea bargain with the defense attorney. But he did, the young man did spend several months in prison, at least close to a year, I think, before they were able to work through the plea bargain. And I believe he is on a multi-year probationary situation at this point. So, again, ongoing legal obligations for administration, but just a word of advice. It's very true, and I believe upon questioning initially, the law enforcement officer said, "Why did you do that?" And his response initially was, "Well, I just wanted to get a rise out of everybody." Well, he certainly did that, and he spent some time in prison and years on probation for it. But one of the things I always tell my student teachers, all of this, if it wasn't for the professionalism and a very alert school teacher who recognized this as a potential serious threat, we may not have even known. Because from what I found out afterwards, that post was shared with hundreds and hundreds of people in our area, and not one person notified the school. So we were very grateful for that young lady to say something to the school teacher, and then the school teacher obviously for making it, bringing it up to our attention, because it could have been a very serious situation. So again, not so ordinary day in a high school. Most people don't realize what goes on behind the scenes besides just teaching and learning and athletics. So again, I am a professor of education administration, and ENMU has a fantastic education administration program at our College of Education and Technology and our Ed Studies Department. All of our education programs are excellent here. So if any of you out there are interested, either in teaching or becoming an administrator, if you're a current teacher, I highly encourage you to visit our website. And if you have any questions specifically that I can help you with, by all means, please email me at john.petrone, that's Petrone, @enmu.edu. Thank you very much.